Welcome back to Visual Anthology. This series of videos is going to be on the Bookfair module. In our first video, we did a little bit of Bookfair overview and showed you how to create a new Bookfair. At this point, we'll continue on with showing you how to add items to a Bookfair. So we'll return back to our sales menu. We'll go back to Bookfairs. And here is that Bookfair number 5 that we created. So now we can start adding items to this Bookfair. And all we do is go to the Details tab. And now we can start adding items. There are a couple of different ways to do this. It really just depends on what's your preference. One method is to do the a little bit more manual and probably slower method by typing in an ISBN or using the Inventory Assistant button to bring up the Inventory Assistant. Maybe do a keyword search on the title that I'm looking for, or I could find an item to fetch it. Let's just say 5 copies are going to go for that title. That's one method, probably not your favorite. We'll F10 to save. Another method is to use scan mode, where you're simply sitting there with your barcode scanner. You've got your pile of books, and you're just going to start scanning the items as you're putting them in the boxes, getting ready to go out the door. That's another option. There is a third option, something that stores will use, especially stores that do a lot of high volume or very frequent, very large book fairs, and that's called batch entry mode. When you're on your draft book fair, such as I am right now, and you go to your Details tab, you can go to the Actions menu and you can say Batch Entry Mode. What this does is puts your book fair into a special state where I could have 2 or 3 people working on the same book fair, all kind of piling up all their books at the same time. So using this, I could go through and I could start putting in those ISBNs, probably by scanning them, again, the most common method. But this batch entry mode is not unlike the manual entry mode or scan mode from the first couple of methods I showed you. But really, it's actually meant to be faster. It doesn't do a lot of double checking to make sure you have enough quantities on hand. It doesn't show you a bunch of other information. It's meant to be very fast, very quick. So you're just zap, zap, zap with that barcode scanner. So let me type in a couple of ISBNs here. I don't have a scanner hooked up at the moment, so this will have to simulate. Now, I've entered an ISBN that does not exist in my system already, so my system needs to check and see, can it find it from that external database? In this case, I'm using Title Source. So it's brought up a little warning message to say, hey, it's found in this external system. Do I want to add it? Yes. And at this point, if I needed to fetch any special information, perhaps classify it in my inventory, you'll notice that as far as the subject goes, they classify it as children's and young adult. Well, in my store, I'm not concerned with it quite so much being that specific, so to me that's just under child care. There's, of course, all sorts of different classifications every store uses, but you get the idea. So at this point I'll do F12 post, and now that item is in the grid on the list of items that will be added to the fair. Let me scan in another item here. This item was in my inventory, and so if I were to have a stack of them, I would just keep scanning them as I'm putting them in the box, and you'll notice that the quantity has changed too. And of course, don't forget to save every so often. And I can keep adding new items just by typing those in or scanning them in. Now in this case, by doing F5 new line, I actually put it into what's considered more of a manual entry mode instead of the green color that was showing up earlier. Let me change this and I'll show you what I mean. Right now we're in what I would consider manual entry mode, but considering that this is batch entry mode, I probably want to be in scan mode, which is meant more to automatically assume a quantity of 1 whenever I scan. So I'll do just a couple more titles here, things that are in my inventory, just to get a good cross-section of items so that we can do a realistic book fair on. Alright, that should be good. Let me save my changes. So my staffer has worked through the pile of books in front of them. They've got them all in the box of books that they're trying to pack up and get ready to go out the door. So one of the next steps that I need to do is actually commit this pile of books so that they get added into what I would call the master book fair record. So right now I'll do F12 commit. Do I really want to commit this? Yes. At this point I now have 2 records in my book fair list tab for book fair number 5, but notice they have different statuses. This draft record, the one that's coming up in green, is what I would consider to be the master record, or the last known picture of what was going on. So if I were to select that item and go to details, I would see all the items that I had manually added in, scanned in, or used that batch entry mode to add in. You'll notice here's all the quantities that I've marked to be sent. This history record is really just a record of what did I scan in that batch entry mode. And you'll notice that it says batch, what date created, and some other pieces of information as well. So if I had several stations working, I'd be able to get a sense of who did what batch. At this point, we're ready to continue on with the actual process of checking out or getting ready to go out the door, and we'll continue that in the next video.